Today, I will continue the introduction in my language, Marathi. आज आपण सर्वजण इथे लोकमान्य टिळक पुण्यतिथी या कार्यक्रमासाठी जमलो आहोत. सर्वप्रथम मी व्यासपीठावर उपस्थित आजचे प्रमुख पाहुणे माननीय संजीव सन्याल सर यांचे स्वागत करतो. त्याचबरोबर मी शिक्षण प्रसारक मंडळीचे अध्यक्ष ॲडव्होकेट सदानंद फडके सर आणि मॅनेजिंग काउन्सिलचे चेअरमन ॲडव्होकेट एस के जैन सर यांचे देखील स्वागत करतो. त्याचसोबत मी महाविद्यालय विकास समितीचे अध्यक्ष श्री केशव वजे सर यांचे देखील स्वागत करतो. व्यासपीठावर उपस्थित आपले प्राचार्य डॉक्टर अविनाश मोरे यांचे देखील मी स्वागत करतो. व्यासपीठावर उपस्थित कुणाल टिळक सर यांचे देखील मी स्वागत करतो. मी वादसभा प्रमुख अरुंधती आपटे मॅडम यांचे देखील स्वागत करतो. त्याचसोबत मी इतर सर्व मान्यवर, शिक्षकेतर कर्मचारी व सर्व श्रोत्यांचे मी शब्द सुमनांनी स्वागत करतो. आज अनेक विद्यार्थी या महाविद्यालयातून शिक्षण घेऊन बाहेर पडत आहेत. आपण सगळे या वास्तूमध्ये शिक्षण घेत आहोत ते फक्त आणि फक्त लोकमान्यांच्या आपल्यावरील ऋणांमुळे. त्यांच्या याच ऋणांप्रती कृतज्ञता व्यक्त करण्यासाठी वादसभा गेली 104 वर्ष लोकमान्य टिळक पुण्यतिथी कार्यक्रमाचे आयोजन करत आहे. आजच लोकशाहीर अण्णाभाऊ साठे यांचा देखील जयंती आहे. लोकशाहीर अण्णाभाऊ साठे म्हणजेच तुकाराम भाऊराव साठे. पोवाडे, गीते, लावण्या यांची त्यांनी जनजागृतीसाठी योग्य वापर केला आणि म्हणूनच आपण त्यांना लोकशाहीर म्हणून ओळखतो. तरी मी मान्यवरांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी कृपया करून त्यांच्या प्रतिमांना फुलं अर्पण करून कार्यक्रमाची सुरुवात करावी. सो आय रिक्वेस्ट ऑल द रिस्पेक्टेड मेंबर्स to pay respects and officially begin the program. VAADASABHA has been the official debating union of the college for the past 108 years. Like every year, in the academic year 2024-25, VAADASABHA successfully organized the Lokmanya Tilak Punyatithi program, yearly auditions, late edition of memorial elocution competition, late PG Sahasrabuddhe national level elocution competition, farewell program and 2 workshops. In the previous academic year, the students of VAADASABHA participated in more than 200 competitions and won prizes in more than 90 of them. I request VAADASABHA in charge Arundhati Apte ma'am to give us an introduction into today's program.
Thank you, Ashwin. Our chief guest today, Honorable Sanjeev Sanyal sir, Member Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, Government of India, and our dignitaries from SP Mandali, Advocate Sadananda Fadke, Advocate S.K. Jain, our CDC Chairman Shri Ashok Vaze sir, our newly appointed Principal Dr. Avinash Moril sir, and all other dignitaries, my colleagues and the students who have come from other colleges and also my students. I welcome you all for today's program, Lokmanya Tilak Punyatithi program, which we have been organizing for the past 105 years. Pune has been a central or a hub of all social political movements for the past many centuries. Especially during the British colonial regime, the scholars, intellectuals and social reformers established a tradition of Vaad-Vivaad or debate that has initiated and encouraged the discussions on nationalism, social justice, economic policies, which were implemented at that time by British. Lokmanya Tilak was one of the key figures in this movement. Living up to that legacy, VAADASABHA in SP College, which was started in 1960, very warmly pays tribute to this great visionary leader and orator who has been instrumental in the establishment of this college. The platform VAADASABHA or Debating Union today has become the best practice in NAT terminology and has provided a unique opportunity to the students of a learning which is outside the classroom, a learning which is based on peer-to-peer learning, experiential learning. So we are very proud to have this legacy in our college. We also pay tribute to the great poet and a shahir, Annabhau Sate, on his birth anniversary. He has been a reformer who ignited minds of the downtrodden class through his povadas and led a movement of social reforms. SP Mandali and SP College are truly honored to have Honorable Sanyal sir for today's program. As a personal admirer of Honorable Sanyal, I feel privileged to have him today with us. True to the ethos of NEP, sir will be delivering his talk on Bharat, the origins of our civilizational identity. We all are excited to listen to Honorable Sanyal. I welcome Sanyal sir and all others in this hall for today's program. Thank you.
धन्यवाद मॅम. आजचे प्रमुख पाहुणे माननीय संजीव सान्याल सर यांचा सत्कार करण्याची मी संस्थेचे अध्यक्ष ॲडव्होकेट सदानंद फडके सर यांना विनंती करणार. त्यामुळे मी आय रिक्वेस्ट द डिग्निटरीज टू फेलिसिटेट मिस्टर सान्याल. Mr. Sanyal is presented with a bouquet, a memento, and a book, The Orion, written by Bal Gangadhar Tilak himself. मी ॲडव्होकेट सदानंद फडके सर यांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी कॉलेजचे नवीन प्राचार्य डॉक्टर अविनाश मोरे यांचा देखील सत्कार करावा. यानंतर मी संस्थेचे मॅनेजिंग काउन्सिलचे अध्यक्ष ॲडव्होकेट SK जैन सरांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी आपले मनोगत व्यक्त करावे.
ऑनरेबल श्री सान्यालजी, संस्थेचे अध्यक्ष ॲडव्होकेट फडके, CDC चेअरमन अशोक वजे सर, SP कॉलेजचे नवीन प्रिन्सिपल आजच ज्यांनी चार्ज घेतलाय अविनाश मोरे सर, वाईस प्रिन्सिपल औचट मॅडम, ज्यांच्या नावाने आणि ज्यांच्या कर्तृत्व भारत नाही तर जगात पसरलेले लोकमान्य टिळकांच्या नातू करण तिलक, उपस्थित सर्व विद्वत आणि सर्वजण उपस्थित बंधूंनो भगिनींनो, I think we are having a great occasion to have Sri Sanyalji to address us on this debate competition. Sri Sanyalji is an economic advisor to Prime Minister of India. He is one of the key persons to fulfill the dream of Honorable Prime Minister to make India as the third economic power in the world. I think that we are fortunate that with all this busy schedule, he has accepted our invitations and remained present on these occasions, perhaps to pay regard to Lokmanya Tilak and to make aware of the various programs of the Government of India, how they are going to meet the challenge of the changes at national and international levels. Certainly, sir, we will be guided by your address. This is the beginning so far as this debate competition is concerned. लोकमान्य टिळकांच्या पुण्यतिथी निमित्त एक गोष्ट सांगतो, म्हणजे त्यांचे गुण आपल्या पुणेकरांना महाराष्ट्राला माहिती नाही असं किंवा त्यांच्याबद्दल सांगणं सुद्धा अवघड होईल, पण आपल्या संस्थेच्या संबंधित आणि जे आपल्या सर्वांना माहितीच असावं की त्यागाचे प्रतीक, म्हणजे ते हुशार होते, ते वकील होते, ते खूप राष्ट्राचे नेते होते वगैरे, हे सर्व आहेतच, पण त्यागाचे प्रतीक हे सांगण्याचं कारण असं की त्यावेळेचं त्यांचा आपसातला काही भेद मतभेद असतील ते सॉल्व पंडित फॅमिलीचे लोकमान्यांनी केले होते. वकील म्हणून किंवा इतर गोष्टींनी त्यांना खूप आग्रह करण्यात आलं होतं की तुम्ही तुमची फी घ्या. एखादा वकील असता तर पहिले आपली फी सोडली नसती आणि मग उपदेश दिला असता की तुम्ही फार केलं, अमकं केलं, तमकं केलं. त्यांनी काय करावं तर म्हणजे दोनदा त्यांनी नाही म्हटलं आणि शेवटी म्हटलं माझी फीस द्यायची असेल तर ही जी तुमची जागा आहे ती शिक्षण प्रसारक म्हटल्या 1 रुपया भाड्याने 99 वर्ष द्या. म्हणजे स्वतःसाठी नाही तर समाजासाठी, राष्ट्रासाठी त्यागाचे प्रतीक, म्हणजे बाकी अन्य गुणमध्ये त्यागाचे प्रतीक हे आपल्या समोर सांगावं असं मला वाटतं. जो आपल्याकडे असायला हवं किंवा आपल्याला मिळणार आहे त्याच्यात त्याग करणारा त्याचीच पूजा केली जाते, त्यांचाच वंदन केलं जातं. And he the persons who command respect. He doesn't demand respect, but command respect from all over the world. So I also pay my tribute on these occasions, and certainly I welcome Sanyalji again, and I hope that it will be one of the best part that we will be guided from your address. I welcome our new principal, Avinashji. Under his leadership, certainly the college will progress with the fast speed. I also pay my regards to Shri Sunil Gaikwad, former principal of the SP College, a symbol of modesty with, I can say that, expert in his field. With all these things, I have never seen him arrogancy or even he has raised the voice. Whatever he want to say, he has assertively said, but with a polite form. So with all these things are concerned, we participants are waiting more for Sanyalji's address, and so I don't want to take even 1 second more to remain between you and Sanyalji. Sanyalji, again I welcome on behalf of Shikshan Prasarak Mandali and SP College and this debating committee who is organizing this. Thank you very much. Jai Hind, Jai Maharashtra.
धन्यवाद सर. दरवर्षी आपल्या कार्यक्रमात सचिल विद्यार्थी पुरस्काराची घोषणा करण्यात येते. तरी मी वादसभा सचिव रमेश कचरे याला आमंत्रित करतो की त्यांनी या वर्षीचे पुरस्कार विजेते घोषित करावे.
नमस्कार. वादसभेच्या वतीने दरवर्षी दिनांक 1 ऑगस्ट रोजी लोकमान्य टिळक पुण्यतिथी कार्यक्रमाचे आयोजन करण्यात येते. ह्या वर्षी ह्या कार्यक्रमामध्ये गोडबोले परिवारातर्फे महाविद्यालयाच्या कला, शास्त्र व वाणिज्य शाखांमधील प्रत्येकी एका विद्यार्थ्याला सत्शील विद्यार्थी पुरस्काराने गौरवण्यात येते. ह्या पुरस्कारासाठी विद्यार्थ्याची निवड त्यांची शैक्षणिक गुणवत्ता, वर्गातील हजेरी, वर्तन, सामाजिक जाणीव, अभ्यासेतर उपक्रमांमधील सहभाग आदी गुणांच्या आधारे करण्यात येते. तरी हे पुरस्कार मी पुढील प्रमाणे जाहीर करीत आहे. कैलासवासी राव बहादूर बापू हरी गोडबोले स्मृती सत्शील विद्यार्थी पुरस्कार. हा पुरस्कार कुमारी टीना नंदकिशोर तांबडे, तृतीय वर्ष, कला शाखा हिला प्रदान करण्यात येत आहे. मी कुमारी टीना नंदकिशोर तांबडे हिला विनंती करतो की तिने हा पुरस्कार मान्यवरांच्या हस्ते स्वीकारावा. आजचे प्रमुख पाहुणे संजीव सान्याल सर यांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी हा पुरस्कार द्यावा. कैलासवासी कमलाबाई ओक स्मृती सत्शील विद्यार्थी पुरस्कार प्रदान करण्यात येत आहे. कुमार दुर्वेश सूर्यकांत पाटणे, पदव्युत्तर विभाग, विज्ञान शाखा. मी कुमार दुर्वेश सूर्यकांत पाटणे याला विनंती करतो की त्यांनी मान्यवरांच्या हस्ते हा पुरस्कार स्वीकारावा. मी शिक्षण प्रसारक मंडळाचे अध्यक्ष ऍडव्होकेट सदानंद फडके सर यांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी हा पुरस्कार द्यावा. कैलासवासी सुशीलाबाई निळकंठ गोडबोले स्मृती सत्शील विद्यार्थी पुरस्कार. हा पुरस्कार कुमार निखिल नारायण कांबळे, तृतीय वर्ष, BBA विभाग याला प्रदान करण्यात येत आहे. मी मान्यवरांना विनंती करतो की त्यांनी हा पुरस्कार निखिल नारायण कांबळे याला प्रदान करावा. तो अनुपस्थित आहे, पण त्यांनी नंतर हा पुरस्कार प्राचार्यांच्या हस्ते स्वीकारावा. सर्व मान्यवरांचे मी आभार मानतो आणि सर्व विद्यार्थ्यांना खूप खूप शुभेच्छा. धन्यवाद.
धन्यवाद रमेश. यानंतर आता मी आजच्या प्रमुख पाहुण्यांचा परिचय करून देण्यासाठी वादसभा सचिव अस्मी खांडेकर हिला आमंत्रित करतो.
Good morning everyone present here. I extend my warm wishes to all the honorable dignitaries, to all the respected faculty members and to the dear students. Today I stand here with utmost reverence and admiration to welcome a visionary, a luminary, a trailblazer, an urban theorist and an economic savant, but above all a true Bharatiya at heart. Honorable Sanjeev Sanyal sir, a member of the Economic Advisory Council to the Honorable Prime Minister. Honorable Sir started his journey as an alumnus of prestigious universities and colleges such as the Xavier's College at Kolkata, Delhi University and Oxford University to name few, where he has been the recipient of multiple coveted scholarships and fellowships such as the Rhodes Scholarship and the Eisenhower Fellowship. Prior to holding the office of ESC, he served as the principal economic advisor to the Honorable Finance Minister. His economics expertise are evident through his pivotal work as the architect of the G20 Action Plan, which acted as the blueprint for the functioning of the world economy during the pandemic. He was also the co-chair of the G20 Framework Working Group. Furthermore, he has represented India on numerous international forums such as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, and the G7. His economic strides are not restricted to the public sector. He has spent over 2 decades in international financial markets as the chief economist of the South and Southeast Asia, and later as the global strategist and managing director at Deutsche Bank. With his monumental contributions to the world of economics and governance, Honorable Sir has been recipient of numerous prestigious accolades like the inaugural International Indian Achievers Award, KPS Menon Memorial Award, and many more. He has also been named the Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum in 2010. In addition to being an accomplished economist, Honorable Sir is a true academician and writer at heart. With his unique blend of economics and history, Sir has written over 300 articles and columns in various international publications, along with best-selling titles like The Land of the Seven Rivers, The Indian Renaissance, and other pieces of literary treasure trove. Coming towards the end, I would like to present a quote of our guest of honor himself, which goes, "The notion of nationhood is not a simple one. It has meant different things for different people in different points of time. Bearing this in mind, without much further ado, I would like to invite Honorable Sanjeev Sanyal sir to please grace the dais and walk us all through the journey of our origins of our civilized nation identity. Thank you."
We can dim the lights on the other side, it will be brighter, that's all. Yeah, somebody can do that. Is the slides clear? Yeah? Okay. So let me begin first by thanking the management, the faculty and the students of SP College for inviting me to be here today. Today is of course a special day because it's of course, as you know, the Punyatithi of Lokmanya Tilak, and we have I think his great-grandson here, great-great-grandson here on the stage at the end. It is also the very first day of your new principal, so please give him a round of applause. So what I'm going to talk about today is a topic which I think Lokmanya Tilak would have been very interested in, which is the issue of the origins of our civilizational identity. This was a topic that was of great interest at the end of the 19th century and early 20th century because we were under colonial rule at that time, and so many of the writings at that time of our nationalist leaders were to go back and begin to dig into the origins of it. Of course, our knowledge has grown since then because we have much more evidence from archaeology and satellite photography, etc. And I'll give you a sense of how we now think about our national identity from the evidence that we have gathered over the century that has passed since then. So, what I'm going to do is to get into why is it that we consider ourselves a nation at all. We call our country Bharat Varsha. Why is it that I, who come from the other extreme of the country, 2,000 kilometers to the east in Bengal, and speak a different language, have different customs and many other things that may be different, still consider myself to belong to the very same nation as you do here in Maharashtra and Pune. So this is what I'm going to talk about. But before that, we need to know what is it that we are pushing back against, and what is it that people like Lokmanya Tilak were arguing against. To understand that, you have to understand that when the British colonized India, one of the first things they did once they had settled their control over the subcontinent was to simply deny that we were a civilization at all. So you have, for example, John Strachey, who was the acting viceroy of India in 1872. He says, the first and most essential thing to learn about India is there is not and never was an India. Now the question is, why was there an East India Company then, if there is no India? Winston Churchill similarly says, India is a geographical term. It's no more united a nation than the equator. So basically what they are doing, you see, is very simple, is that when you are occupying another country and want to perpetuate your occupation, the first and obvious thing to do is to simply deny that there was a nation that you are occupying. And if you think they only did it to us, let me assure you, colonial powers, not just the British, the French, the Dutch, everybody, one of the first things they would do after occupying a country is to declare it something called terra nullius, which is empty country, literally means that. So that it means that you can treat the people who exist there before you turned up and say that there was nobody there. So, for example, when the British occupied Australia, they declared it terra nullius. Now, obviously, there were people living there. So, what they did is simply to assume that those people were not really a civilization or a people, settled people. And to do that, you have to create a legal fiction called terra nullius. So, in fact, well into the 20th century, the Australian Aboriginals were actually treated under the wildlife law. Cultural roots of the people you occupy. So this is how they were doing it. Now the bizarre thing is, we are now 78 years after independence, and many of these lies that the colonial period were sprouting for their obvious reasons are very often continued to today. So ironically, I have to come here in 2025 and stand here in front of an audience of Indians and make the case for India as a civilization. And I think it is important to do this, because if we do not tell the next generation, you will default back to these colonial tropes, because of course the colonizers may have gone, but the interests that do not want us to rise again as a nation still exist. So here goes. So the question first arises that where is this, we call ourselves the Bharatiya people, where does this term originally come from? What is the oldest origin of this term? And it turns out that the very origin, the first place we know of where this term Bharata was used is actually in the Rig Veda. The Rig Veda is the oldest extant text in India. We do not know how old it is, but as I will show you, it is at least 4,000 years old. Most likely it is more than 5,500 years old. And this text, which was originally oral and then written down later, basically refers to a Vedic tribe called Bharata, or also Trutsu. By the way, there is another name many people do not know, which we have, the Bharata Trutsu tribe, which was a relatively small tribe which we know was living along a river called the Saraswati River. Now this river is very important because the Saraswati River is repeatedly mentioned in the Rig Veda. It is the most mentioned geographical feature in the Rig Veda. So it is mentioned 45 times in the hymns, it's mentioned in 45 of the hymns and mentioned 72 times. And it was obviously a major geographical feature because it is called Sindhu Mata, which is the mother of cities. It's called limitless, unbroken, swift flowing, the great flood. So it was obviously a very major geographical feature and of great importance to this tribe living on its banks in what is the general area that we now know as Haryana. Okay? Now, even today we remember this link because if you do Saraswati Puja, the last line that you have in the end of the puja is Bhagwati Bharati Devi Namaste. So Saraswati Puja always ends with the incantation. So the river Saraswati, which we now later on became the goddess of knowledge, is still even today remembered as Bharati. So this link to the Bharatas is very, very old. Now the question immediately arises, okay, so there was this river and there was a small tribe living next to it, but where was this river? Now, one of the things that very often colonial era historians and then later on those who denied the Indian nationhood try to say that it's somewhere in Central Asia, or maybe it's a figment of people's imagination. All kinds of arguments are given to place either the Saraswati is something mythical or somewhere in Central Asia or some such place, as long as it's not in India. Now, frankly, there is no scope for debate in the matter because in the Nadistuti Suktam of the Rig Veda, which you can check yourself, the exact position of the Saraswati is mentioned. Because in this hymn, the rivers of India are enumerated, northern India at this stage are enumerated from east to west. Okay? And so they go as follows. O Ganga, Yamuna, Saraswati, Shutudru, which is Satluj, Parushni, Ravi, Askini, Chenab, and so on. So you can very clearly see that the Yamuna is between, the Saraswati is between the Yamuna and the Satluj. there is no debate. You cannot debate the matter because it is clearly stated in the Rig Veda, and I've given you, in everything that I will state, I will give you the exact book, the hymn and verse. So you can check it yourself, you don't have to take my word for it. So, the Saraswati is between the Yamuna and the Shatudru. We also know from the Rig Veda, another stanza, that pure is her course from the mountains to the ocean, alone the streams of Saraswati had listened. Which means it was a river that ran from the mountains to the ocean. Now this is a problem here because today there is no river that exists with this definition, which is between the Yamuna and the Sutlej and runs from the mountains to the ocean. But was there ever a river like this in India? Well, it turns out there was. And there is more than adequate evidence of this, because if you look at satellite photographs, you can see the green line there. That is the paleo channel of a river that clearly dried up, and we have dates for it, which I'll come to. And you can see that it used to flow from somewhere in the mountain, from just north of Chandigarh, through what is now Haryana. It had a large number of tributaries, and then it went through what is the Thar, and at different points in time, it, by the way, shifted course. So it's not one course, it has shifted course, and maybe that is why it had the name as Mother of Floods, because it used to shift course. And then ultimately it ends up in the what is now the Run of Kutch. And it is very important to remember that the Run of Kutch, which today is the salt flats, did not look like this during the Bronze Age. You have to know this because you see the sea level at that time was higher, and the river that you can see used to flow into this, not only this river but also the Indus, which used to flow somewhat east of where it does today, into the estuary. And the Run of Kutch is actually the original estuary of the Saraswati and the Indus. And the salt flats you see are the result of the drying up of this, of that estuary. Because so this is where it used to be. In fact, if you had gone there 5,000 years ago, it would have looked a lot more like the Sundarbans looks like today. So, which is why when you look at Harappan seals, you'll see something interesting. There are no lions. Today we think of Gujarat with lions, but in the Harappan seals there are no lions. There are only tigers, which are wet country hunters. Lions are dry country hunters. So the climate of this region was totally different. And it fits another thing, which is that most of the Harappan sites are not along the Indus. So we call it the Indus Valley civilization, but in fact, as you can see, most of the sites are actually along the dry riverbed of this river that we now know as the Ghaggar. So this dry riverbed still exists. During the monsoons, if we went right now, it still flows in the upper reaches, not all the way. And most of these sites are actually, both on the Indian side and on the Pakistani side, are along the dry riverbed of this river. Now we know now from geological surveys, which Lokmanya Tilak would not have known at that time, that this river basically flowed for a period of time, but at its height between 9,000 years ago and about 5,000 years ago. Then it began to dry, and about 4,000 odd years ago, that's about 2000 BC, it completely dried up, and the whole civilization, the Saraswati Indus civilization, collapsed. So we know that climate change caused this because there is now adequate evidence for this. But it is important to know the landscape that I am dealing with. Now, when you go back to the Rig Veda, one of the things that comes through from it is that not only did the Vedic people, the Bharatas, live along this river, they had a name for their original homeland. So the original name of the original homeland that they have is Sapta Sindhu or Sapta Sindhuva. Why is this important? Because it says, it literally means the land of the seven rivers. Those who have read my second book, it's called Land of Seven Rivers. It's derived from Sapta Sindhu. So the problem here is, which is those seven rivers? Because the Rig Veda assumes that everybody knows what the land of the seven rivers is, so it never actually tells you what those seven rivers are. So many historians lazily assume that this relates to the five rivers of the Punjab, the Indus, Sindhu, plus the Saraswati. That gives you the seven. Actually, this does not fit the evidence. When you read the Rig Veda, it says, coming together gloriously, loudly roaring Saraswati, mother of floods, the seventh with copious milk, with fair streams strongly flowing, fully swelled by the volume of their waters. It is very obvious from this that you are not dealing with other river systems but with one river system, i.e., all these six other rivers are essentially flowing into the Saraswati. These are tributaries of the Saraswati. So you are dealing with a much smaller area than we originally think. These are essentially the seven these are seven rivers that come together to form the Saraswati River. You're looking at tributaries of the same river system. Now what this means is you're dealing with a very small area, essentially today's Haryana. And this is also corroborated by the evidence from later texts. So in later texts, it's very interesting. The Mahabharata mentions the two interesting things. First of all, it tells us that the Saraswati River dried up. Okay? That it was there is already in the Mahabharata a clear mention that the river has dried up. And the reason we know this is that Balram, the elder brother of Lord Krishna, he did not participate in the Kurukshetra war. He got disgusted by these cousins who were fighting amongst themselves, and he went on a tirth. And he basically started along the banks of the Saraswati River when he did this. Interestingly, he mentions that the river is actually dried up because he says that the river goes into the desert and disappears in a place called Vinashana. So already you can see climate change is happening, the rainfall is declining, Western India is desiccating, this river no longer flows to the ocean anymore. But interestingly, he also leaves us the names of those seven rivers. So he mentions, and again I've given you exactly which book, Shalya Parva, and which chapter, and you can look it up. It says the seven streams of the Saraswati are Suparva, Kanchanakshi, Vishala, Manorama, Ughavati, Surenu, and Vimala, Dukha. So these are the seven streams that come together to create the Sapta Saraswati. So again, the idea of seven rivers as a homeland. And he says that the Saraswati, so we don't know where all these seven rivers are because they have all disappeared now. But we know the location of at least where one of them used to flow. So it says the Saraswati, full of sacred waters, flows at Kurukshetra under the name of Oghavati. So we know it in Kurukshetra, and there is a riverbed, dry riverbed in Kurukshetra. If you go and visit it, you will see it. There is some part of it is considered a sacred tal even today, and there's a festival of taking a dip there. That is the river Oghavati. So we know that one of them used to flow. So again, what are we finding? A dry river system and essentially Haryana. So now the question comes, if what we are dealing with is a very small tribe living in what is today's Haryana, how did the rest of us come to consider ourselves to be Bharatiya and name ourselves after this very small Haryanvi tribe? You are not from Haryana, I am not from Haryana. So why are we? And to understand this, you need to understand the only clear political event that you can discern from the Vedic texts. It is very, very important. It's mentioned repeatedly in the Vedic texts and in later texts as well, but particularly in the Vedic texts. And it's called the Battle of 10 Kings. So what is going on in the Battle of 10 Kings? What happens is that the Bharatas, during the time of a chieftain called Sudasa, who was a descendant of Devoda, another great king called Devodasa. So at the time of Sudasa, he and his guru, Rishi Vasishtha, faced a major crisis, which is that a coalition not only of his own tribe but also of the defeated tribes and all of the tribes that he was in contact with at that point in time. And they basically convened all their best knowledge into the Samhitas. That Samhita is a compilation. And this is basically what we now know as the Vedas. So the Rig, the Sam, the Yajur, and later on the Atharva are essentially the compilation of the best ideas of the times. And it doesn't only come from the Bharatas. In fact, interestingly, the people who have the largest sort of contribution to the Vedas are actually not Vashishta's family, who are the winning tribe, but Bhrigu and Vishwamitra. In fact, the Gayatri Mantra is done under the school of Vishwamitra. Is his school that contributed it. So, what happens as a result is amazing, is that as a result of this, the first prototype, the operational principle of Indian civilization is established, which is that of assimilation as opposed to imposition. And I am not just sort of reading the book and trying to, maybe this is the case. It is explicitly written in the Rig Veda itself that we have this coming together of the tribes. They take all their gods and put it in one common pool where everybody respects everybody else's god. So this is a very unique model. Because remember, in those times and in later times, whenever one tribe defeated another tribe, they said, look, our gods must be more powerful than your gods, so you must now worship our gods. Here is a different conception where we say everybody's gods have to be respected. And this is then done, it is there in many places in the Rig Veda, this sort of creation of this model is mentioned, but it is most explicitly mentioned in the very last chant of the Rig Veda, where it states that all the ancient gods have a place around the Yajna fire. It says, assemble, speak together, let your minds be of one accord. As all the ancient gods have taken their rightful seat around the fire, the place is common, common the assembly, common the mind, so be your thoughts united. This is a very common chant, many of you probably know. It's called the Samanasya Suttam. A common purpose do I lay before you, and together we make offerings to the fire. United your resolve, may your minds come together, united the thoughts of all that we may happily agree. This is the underlying operating system of our civilization. This is the civilizational contract. And it is such a powerful idea that it begins to spread. So at some point in time, this spread to all over the country. So my forefathers at some point in time sitting in Bengal also said this is a good idea. Now, I don't know, I am a Shakta, I am a worshipper of female deities primarily. So it's possible that we also contributed Durga, Kali and others to the common pool. And that's how everybody around the country, it's possible that from here, I don't know, maybe Ganesh and Bhavani, etc. And so you begin to see interconnections happening across the country of a civilizational ethos. And by the Puranic period, it becomes very explicit. So in the Puranic period, the idea of Sapta Sindhu spreads. So as I told you, the Sapta Sindhu originally is only Haryana. But by the Puranic period, so we are now somewhere in the Iron Age, maybe 5th century BC, I'm just guessing. But you see, the Puranic texts are written from about 7th, 8th century BC into the Christian period, 5th, 6th century into the Christian period. So over 1,000-year period. And in all of them, you have a description of the landscape of a country. And there, the Sapta Sindhu is mentioned with different rivers. So I'm going to give you a chant which many of you may know is very commonly done, many of you may know it for ritual bathing, which goes somewhat like this. Gange cha Yamunai chaiva Godavari, Saraswati, Narmade, Sindhu, Kaveri, Jalasmin, Sandhinin, Kuru. Now notice here, you have Ganga, Yamuna, which is there in the original. You also have Saraswati. But you now have Godavari, you now have Narmade, Sindhu is there, Kaveri is there. So the entire subcontinent has now got covered by this landscape. The Sapta Sindhu is now a larger landscape. The idea of who the Bharatas are has now become the whole subcontinent. And it is there repeatedly. So, for example, the same text, Brahma Purana, I am using Vivek Debroy's translation, but you can all go there, look at exactly these lines, chapters, etc. It mentions again the Varsha, i.e., the land that is north of the ocean and south of the Himalayas is known as Bharata, and the peoples there are known as Bharati. So, you again clearly states who are the Bharatas. It also states who are our neighbors. So, for example, it says the Kiratas, who are the Tibeto-Burman people, live to the east, and the Yavanas, i.e., the Greeks, live to the west. So, we now can date this when Brahma Purana was written. This must have been immediately after Alexander's invasion, because the Greeks at that point are living to the west. Of course, the Tibeto-Burmans still live to our east. So, this is the landscape again. It is also interesting that it is not just the rivers. They also have the same thing: 7 rivers, 7 mountain ranges, and so on. So here are the 7 mountain ranges, and by the way, all the Puranas have some similar sort of description. Here I am using again Brahma Purana just for consistency. It says the 7 mountain ranges of Bharata are Mahendra, which is eastern Ghats; Malaya, which is southwestern Ghats, which we now call Nilgiris; the Sahya, which is Sahyadris, you are right there, northern western Ghats; Suktimat, which is not clear to me, my guess is that it's the Aravalis; the Riksha, which is the Satpuras; the Vindhyas, which in the original text was actually the eastern Vindhyas only, and the Pariyatra, which is the western Vindhyas. They meet in what is now Vindhyachal, just near Varanasi, Mirzapur. So again, you can see the 7 mountain systems. Now, if you happen to be from the northeast and you're feeling left out, don't worry, people remember you. They say that there are those who reside in the east, such as the inhabitants of Kamarupa. So there is a clear conscious understanding that there is northeast and the people there mentioned, such as the people of Kamarupa, the others who live there as well. Now, at some point in time in this discussion, somebody says, but what about the Dravidians? So let me tell you a little bit about the Dravidians. The oldest Tamil texts literature that exists is the collection of poems, poetry in Old Tamil called the Sangam literature. This was compiled somewhere between the 2nd century BC and the 2nd century AD. Now, the oldest text of that is called the Tolkappiyam. Okay, not making it up, you can Google all this information up yourself. The Tolkappiyam is a grammatical text. Okay, it writes the grammar. In that grammar and in the preface of that grammar, it states, in the virtuous Tamil speaking land that extends from Venkatam in the south to Kumari Venkatam in the north to Kumari in the south. Kumari is obviously Kanyakumari, and Venkatam is the Tirumala hills, which is today in Andhra Pradesh, where it's at the border. So you can actually draw the map of Tamil Nadu even today with this description. And in the same preface, it states that the text is in the wisdom of the 4 Vedas rooted. Now, why is this important? That this is the oldest known proclamation of Tamil identity that exists. There is no older Tamil identity proclaimed anywhere, and there it states that this identity is rooted in Vedic civilization. So if there is a Tamil identity, it is rooted in Vedic civilization. So by the time Tamil identity became clear, it was essentially a part of Bharatiya civilization. There is no way of getting around this. And it is not like we have forgotten the Haryanvis. In later times also, the land between the Saraswati and the Drishadhuti, which is today the dry river bed of the Khapgar and the dry river bed of the Chautang, which is basically modern Haryana. It is known that this is the Brahmavarta, the land of the gods. Basically, we still remember that there's something special about this area. We still remember it, and of course, archaeology now shows that this area is where the largest concentration of Iron Age and Harappan sites are, including the very biggest one, which is Rakhigadi. But there are many in that area, Kali Bangan, this, that. Now, there is this Suda's story, and that is there, is well established, and you can read it in the Vedas. But there are other stories of how the name of Bharatvarsha came about. Now, the later traditions are interesting. And remember that this is coming thousands of years later. So by the time the Itihasas, etc., have been written, thousands of years have passed between the Vedic Sudasa period, which is, my guess is, in the early Harappan period, 5,000 years, 6,000 years ago. And by the time we are in the Vedic period, which is maybe 3,000 years ago. Thousands of years have passed, the language has changed. The language of the Vedas, by the way, is completely different from the language of the Mahabharata. Only 50% of the words are the same. By this time, and in later Puranic and other texts, there is the legend of Raja Bharat. This is not to be considered, this is not to be confused with the Bharat of the Ramayana. Also not to be confused with the Bharat of, who is the Kalidasa's Bharat, who is the Shakuntala and Dushyant's son. This is an earlier Bharat, who was the descendant also of great kings. One of them was Nabhi, and also of Rishabh. Now, so the son of Rishabh and the grandson of Nabhi. Now, why these are important is also that India actually has another name, because Nabhi is also supposed to have conquered the entire subcontinent. So India has another name, Nabhi Varsha. His son Rishabh was a great conqueror, but then he got disillusioned with warfare, and he became the founder of the Jain tradition. And his son again went back to being a great king, Bharat, after whom also another tradition of Bharatvarsha is there. He also conducted the Ashwamedha and the Rajasuya Yagyas and declared himself the Chakravartin. Now the question is there a link between Sudasa and Bharat? I do not know, because these are two traditions, but there are clearly some parallels. Very often a king is known by the name of his tribe, as you know. So maybe Bharat was not his actual name, but it was known by the name of his tribe, the Bharatas. Just like Sudasa, he conducted Ashwamedha Yagya, converted and declared himself to be a Chakravartin. He was a great conqueror and so on. It's possible that there were two separate characters who did similar things, or by the time of the Mahabharata, they were already beginning to forget the original stories, and so this is a garbled memory of the original Sudas. Now, I do not know the link between the two. This is an area of research somebody should take up. But whichever way you think the story went, it is important that the symbol of the Chakravartin became the symbol of the great king. And it is there, consequently, in many places, then was incorporated by Buddhists into their thing, because then Buddha became the Chakravartin in the spiritual field. So the symbol of the chakra is used. But the symbol of the chakra is there in the Jain tradition. It is there in the Vedic, later Puranic tradition as well. So the symbol of the chakra is very important. And of course, it is there even today. The Mauryan chakra is there in our national flag. It is a symbol of the Indian state. The Devas are the bad guys. And Ahura, and the Asura Mazda becomes the great lord. Now this is interesting, because you see in the Vedic texts, the Devas and Asuras are not, there is no connotation of good and bad. They are actually two sets of competing deities, like yin and yang. So many of the gods of the Vedas are actually Asuras. For example, Varuna and Mitra and Rudra are Asuras. They are worshipped, but they are not Devas, they are Asuras. There is a tension between the two, but that tension is like, as I said, the yin and yang tension that keeps the world in balance. They are both involved in the Samudra Manthan, for example. So this connotation of them being one side being better than the other in the Vedic tradition is much later. And even there in the Hindu tradition to this date, the Asuras are not entirely bad, as I will show you. There are many good Asuras like Raja Mahabali and Prahalad was Asura. So there are good Asuras also. But there is a mirror image in the Persian tradition where there is clearly the Devas are bad and the Asuras are good. Was there an ancient battle between the two? I don't know. They clearly came from the same culture. And interestingly, in the Battle of 10 Kings, there is one tribe that is defeated called the Parasas. Were they the Persians? Were they then escaped westward and became part of the Iranian culture? We don't know, because the Persians then completely disappear, the Parasas completely disappear from the Vedic literature. The Brigus continue, the defeat, and other defeated tribes are mentioned later, but the Parasas disappear. So maybe they are the Persians. I don't know. I'm just telling you how this may be. But there, it is interesting, like in the Avestan text, Hapta Hindu is mentioned as a place of importance, but it also says that it has degraded. It says the place has become too hot. Beautiful Harahpati has now been violated. They are now burying or cremating the dead. Now remember, this is very interesting because the Parsis neither bury or cremate their dead. They leave it out in the open for vultures. So obviously there are all these tensions in the thing, and whereas we know that the Harappan people and the Vedic people, both of them, used to both bury and cremate their dead. So you can see that this tension is all there. But they are mentioning all the time this land called the Hapta Hindu, which lies to the east. They're mentioning this beautiful river called the Harahpati. So obviously something has happened, some political, philosophical, ideological tussle is going on. Now, later texts continue with this, and so you have, for example, later Chinese, Greeks, etc., then take on this idea of the Hapta Hindu. So later on, you see, for example, the Arabs and others call India Al-Hind. You can see the term Hapta Hindu goes westward to the Greek word, Hindu becomes India, Indioi, and so on. And I'm telling you this, which is somewhat different from what is the mainstream thinking on this. People think that the first mention of India outside as Hindu comes from Sindhu river. It's not the case. The first mention actually comes from land of seven rivers, Hapta Hindu, not from river Sindhu. That is a later understanding. And similarly, the Chinese also called us Yuandu, Tianshu. They're all obviously derived from the word Sindhu, Al-Hind, and so on. So later traditions then take this word. And it is in this context, I would say, that the word India is actually very, very old. It is an exonym. It's a word by which other countries called us. But it is directly derived from our ancient name that the Bharatas had for their homeland, which is Hapta Hindu. So in that sense, it is just as old as the name Bharata, and they are linked. I just wanted you to know this. Now, it is not the case that only in the very ancient Vedic times or in Puranic times we have a sense of our civilization. I am now reached the early medieval period, and even in the medieval period, this sense of nationhood is there. And you see that in the distribution of the Shakti Pithas. And what are the Shakti Pithas? To understand the Shakti Pithas, you have to understand what is the story. The story is that Shiva's first wife was Sati. She was human and she was married. She married Lord Shiva. But when she married Lord Shiva, her father Daksha was very, very unhappy about the match. as you know, Lord Shiva is a little wild kind of a god, and he has somewhat disreputable friends, and lives up in a rather cold place called Kailash. So I suppose no father wants his daughter to be married to somebody like Lord Shiva. So he was not happy about the situation. So anyway, he decided to do a great yajna. He was a great king, and he did it. And he invited all the great rishis and all the gods, with one exception, Lord Shiva, who was his son-in-law. Now notice that this is a violation of the Vedic contract. Because the Vedic contract, as I showed you, clearly states that all the ancient gods have a place around the fire. So to not have called Shiva was to have violated that contract. So when the great yajna is being done, Sati turns up and she states that, look, you are violating the contract. And she then violates the whole thing by jumping into the sacrificial fire and violating it completely, stopping it. Now, at this juncture, Lord Shiva suddenly realizes what is happening, that his wife has killed herself defending his honor, and he turns up and he's very angry. He lifts her body and he is going to destroy the world. At this situation, Lord Vishnu basically tries to calm him down. He doesn't know how to do it. So what he does, the first thing got to do is to remove the dead body from his arms. So he sends a Sudarshan Chakra, chops her body up into tiny parts, and it falls on the earth and distributes itself on the earth. And all the places where it falls are now known as the Shakti Pithas. Now it is important, essentially what is going on here is a reminder of the ancient civilizational contract. Sati literally unites the sacred geography of India in her own body. She is reminding everybody of the sacred contract. And look at where it's distributed. Yes, there is a bit of a concentration to the east, because that's the Shaktas like myself are concentrated to the east. But you can see that generally speaking where it is, it's all four corners of the subcontinent. The northernmost one is in Sharda Peeth, which is now in Pakistan occupied Kashmir. The westernmost is in Hinglaj Mata, now in Balochistan. Southernmost is Kanyakumari, and the easternmost is Tripura Sundari, now in the state of Tripura. In fact, the state of Tripura is named after her. And of course, they are distributed all over the rest of the country. There is one very close to you as well. There are at least a few close to you as well. So again, notice that this is not a random distribution. It is a distribution over a clear geography. By the way, I can make the same case for you using the Asuras. Okay? Rishi Kashyapa, after whom Kashmir is named, swallowed the waters of the lake that led to the creation of the Kashmir Valley. So, northernmost Kashmir Valley, Rishi Kashyap. His grandson was Prahalad, the Asura prince, who is protected by Lord Vishnu as Narasimha. He is associated with Multan, now in Pakistan. The grandson of Prahalad is Mahabali. He is associated with Kerala. He was humbled again by Vishnu in Onam and celebrated in his name. Right? So, southern tip. The son of Mahabali or grandson of Mahabali is Banasur, who is associated with Siam. His capital was Sonitpur, today is modern Tezpur. His daughter Usha would marry Lord Krishna's granddaughter Aniruddha. So you can see the Asuras are also, you can actually draw the map of India, the four corners, using the Asuric tradition also. And I am repeating this because the Asuric tradition, unlike what is there, unfortunately now, we have Abrahamized our religion and we have begun to call them the demons. They are not demons. The Asuras are actually parallel set of gods. And in fact, there are many parallel traditions in Hinduism which are derived from the Asuric tradition. Interestingly, including the Shakta tradition is very closely related to this. The Bhrigus,
were related to the Shakta tradition. So, for example, when Mahabali is trying to asked by Vishnu to give up his power over the three worlds, the Mahabali, the argument for him is not made by Mahabali himself, but by his guru, Shukracharya. Shukracharya is a descendant of the Bhrigus. Now, same thing happens late medieval period. You have Shankaracharya. Shankaracharya goes around the country in the end to end in the 8th century. He sets up mutts, Puri, Sringeri, Dwarka, Badrinath. They are not random locations. They are 4 corners of the country. Similarly, you take Jambu Dvipa. That's another name for our continent. Now, the problem with the term Jambu Dvip, it's a medieval term for the Indian subcontinent, is that it is very often used in Buddhist, Jain and Puranic texts. It is used sometimes in a cosmological sense, so it sometimes is very confusing whether it's used in a cosmological sense or a geographical sense. But to the extent it's used in a geographical sense, it talks about the subcontinent. Sometimes it means all of Asia also, right? So it's a little confusing. But nevertheless, it is interesting if you look at a jambu. I'm sure many of you know what a jambu fruit looks like. Look at it. If you see it, it is higher towards the end and got these ridges. It looks like mountains, and then it narrows into a peninsula. Now, if you wanted to explain to somebody who's not educated what the Indian landscape subcontinent look like, it's a very simple way of explaining it. The mountains in the north and the peninsula in the south. So, Jambu, a rose apple tree, and this is Jambu Dvipa is then given as a name. Now, okay, Bronze Age, Indians had an Indian sense of themselves. Medieval time, they had a sense of India as a civilizational entity. What about modern times? Did we forget that? And turns out not. Here I have the Trichy Declaration of the Marudu Pandyans in 1801. Now, what happened is that this is one of the earliest rebellions against the East India Company by the Polygars, who were the chieftains in what is now, roughly speaking, Tamil Nadu. And the chief Marudu Pandyan made a declaration of independence in 1801. And he does it in Trichy. And he states to the castes and people, the Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaisyas, Shudras and Musalmans, again note here that the Musalmans by this point have been incorporated into our civilizational fabric, that who are in Jambu subcontinent of Jambu Dvipa, this notice is given. So he is making a declaration of independence from the British, and he is doing it not in the name of the Dravidian people, the Tamil people. He is doing it in the name of all the people of Jambu Dvipa. So I want to make this clear that there is very strong sense by this point of our civilizational sense. And again, as I said, it is an evolving one. First it's just Haryana, then it becomes this landscape. By this point you can see the Muslim culture is being incorporated into the understanding. End of the century, 1890 to 92, and I'm showing you from different parts of the country, people have the same sense. Shankaracharya, southern India, Marudu Pandyan, southern India. What about eastern India? Northern people have already contributed, the Bharatas originally. Late 19th century. Late 19th century, here you have Tilak, Lokmanya Tilak talking about India. On the other side, you have Vivekanand from my part of the country. He goes around the country. Again, he's not randomly wandering around. There's a clear east, north, west, south. And where does he come to the conclusion about what his mission in life is? On what is now known as Vivekananda Rock in Kanyakumari. He didn't go to Ganga Sagar or Dakshineshwar temple and come to this. He went to another part of the country. So what I'm trying to tell you is that this sense we have of being a nation is very deep rooted, it's very strong. Unless you understand this, you cannot understand Indian history at all. You cannot understand Maharana Pratap. You cannot understand Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj unless you understand this. So what is the point I made through all of this? That the idea of Bharat is ancient. It is evolving. Different points in time, in different landscapes. There would have been a point in time when we would have included, for example, even Indonesia into it. In fact, even today, people in Indonesia call themselves Indonesians. They named their country after India. Their national symbol is the Garuda. So, this is not a static idea. There were points in time we would have incorporated parts of Central Asia, like Afghanistan, into our conception of what is India. So, it is not static. Second, it's not pure. We have incorporated many things along the way. Today, can you think of Indian civilization without cricket? Or our food without thinking of tomatoes and potatoes which were brought by the Portuguese? Or in the language, I'm speaking in English to you at the end of the day. I'm not speaking to you in an Indian language. But it is as Indian as it gets nowadays. In fact, there are more people speaking English and who understand English in India than in any other place in the world. So this is very important. It's evolving. It's not a pure culture. We have absorbed many things along the way. But at the same time, let me say that the fact that we are happy to absorb other things does not mean that it extends to celebrating our own subjugation. It is perfectly okay to like potatoes and tomatoes without being enthusiastic about the Goa Inquisition. It is perfectly fine to have like Shakespeare and the English language or like cricket and not be enthusiastic about British subjugation of India. And it is perfectly fine to appreciate the beauty of the Taj Mahal without being excited about the conquest of India by the Mughals. I want to make this because many people confuse the two. And the founders of the Republic of India were conscious of this. This is important, that when we were establishing the Republic of India, in which, by the way, another great person from this part of the country, Ambedkar, played a role in writing our constitution, but there were many others who created the view of India, from Veer Savarkar to Lokmanya Tilak, Gokhale, and so on. They were very conscious that they were inheritors of an ancient nation. So, when Jawaharlal Nehru in 15th of August 1947 at Independence says, "When the soul of a nation long suppressed finds utterance," obviously he was very conscious that this is a soul of a nation long suppressed, which means it existed for a long time. It's not coming in existence on the 15th of August. It has already existed for a long time. The first line of the Constitution of India, Indian Republic, India, that is Bharat, shall be a union of states. Both the names are mentioned. They are not translations of each other. Otherwise, the Indian version which would say India shall be a union of states and the Hindi version would say Bharat shall be a union of states. That would be the end of the matter. Both names are mentioned in both. Why? Because India, the modern republic, and Bharat, that is the ancient civilization. And so the modern republic is the modern manifestation of this ancient civilization. So this is what is being stated. And it's not something that I have sort of come up with, it's explicitly debated and discussed. So, in the speech to the Constituent Assembly on the 4th of November 1948, Ambedkar clarifies this in the draft constitution because he said maybe people later on will debate what on earth we meant. So, though the country and the people may be divided into different states for convenience of administration. So the point is making, yes, we may be different states, but it's a convenience of administration, just an administrative unit. The country is one integral whole. Its people a single people living under a single imperium derived from a single source. So this is very, very important. This is the reason the central government can redraw the boundaries of different states. Because it's an administrative convenience. My identity does not change because I live in Delhi today. I'm Bengali, I was born in Bengal. I live in Delhi, I vote in Haryana. But no matter where I am, I'm Indian. Clearly stated by Ambedkar. He also states the drafting committee thought that it is better to make this clear in the onset than to leave it to speculation or dispute. Because maybe he thought that many generations later, the great grandson of Nehru would have some doubts about this. So with that, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed the presentation. If there is time for questions, I can happily answer. Yeah, thank you. Can I have some?
Hello. Namaskar, Babu Moshe. This is in the realm of economics and regarding UPI. I have three parts to the question. First is
अरे
the
बाबा एक part दूसरे लोग भी पूछेंगे ना.
okay, sure. With NPCI deciding to add, charging UPI transactions, what is the implication of that on UPI per se?
So obviously we have originally envisaged it as a public utility and it has become very popular. But of course somebody has to pay for it. So the question is, do we have toll charges or not? And so this is a matter of debate, by the way. There are some advantages of keeping it free, like a utility, like a public garden which everybody uses for no charge. But then we as a country have to then decide that look, it is so useful that we should continue to run this in a free way. So it's a debate to be had. There are obviously two sides to it. It is an expensive thing that you have to keep running if you have to do it completely free. Having a business model is always good. There are some people may argue that look, you're getting such good data, why do you need to charge? You can maybe mine the data for other things. So it's a matter of debate. But I think as a people we need to have that discussion. So if we are going to keep it free, then we should all be clear that we are keeping it free. Some money that can be spent on something else will now have to be spent to keep it going. So it is something that is of some debate, which is of interest to all of us. Somebody else here? Yeah. Otherwise I'll get accused of being right-wing.
Namaste sir. I'm myself Chintan, a law student, and I'm asking a question regarding the slide that you shared about the Aryan and the Dravidian. So the question that I was asking is about the alternative epistemology, which is to say that the notions of race from your presentation it appears to be does not apply to India because we have acculturated several races. So when the post-colonial studies used race as a yardstick to say Aryan migration or invasion or anything, how do we settle that debate? To basically say that.
So, first of all, there is no evidence of this Aryan invasion in the sense that people you see, what was the origin of it? The origin of it is again in colonial thinking that, first of all civilization came from white people. And by the way, they didn't just do it in India, they also had in Africa once they conquered it. They had something called the Hamitic invasion theory, by which any city, any civilizational entity found in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, was given to be some migration from the Mediterranean must have led to it. So they had an Hamitic invasion theory. Now in Africa, of course, people will laugh if you come and mention the Hamitic invasion theory. For example, that was given, for example, in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe, the country is named after the city of Great Zimbabwe. The original European idea was that some people from the Mediterranean came there and settled there and created Great Zimbabwe. The children of Ham. Hence the Hamitic theory. Now if I go to Zimbabwe and mention the Hamitic theory, people will laugh at me. They're not only angry, they'll just think I'm mad. But in India, we are still continuing, people are debating these things. Why? Very simple. What did the Europeans want to say? Look, we have conquered you. We know you have a civilization, because in India they can't deny that there was a pre-existing civilization. But basically even the civilization you're proud of was given to you by white people. And we are just here to give you a software update. So don't mind. Now obviously a Western occupying power will have this view. So the question is, why is it that we have this view that we have incorporated? It is a complete misunderstanding of this view, that this line of thought that goes leads to all kinds of bizarre outcomes, as you will see. For example, the term Dravida. Actually, Dravida term is not so much used for South Indians so much. The term used from them is Ramila, Tamila, etc. Dravida term is mostly used ironically for people from Maharashtra in the ancient texts. That's why Rahul Dravid is Maharashtrian Brahmin, happens to be living in Bangalore. Okay, so you have this absurdity. Some people say, oh, the great king of the Dravids was Ravan. First of all, Ravan was actually born in Noida. He was a Brahmin born in Noida. So if you go to Noida, Greater Noida, his original birthplace is there. So he was what you may today call a Noida rage boy. Many of his relatives driving around in Noida, you'll know exactly what they're doing. So you have these absurdities that come because you do not bother to read our texts. So for example, the term Manu and Manuvadi. Now the term Manu is actually not the name of an individual. The term means lawgiver, because the Hindu view of history is cyclical. After every cycle, the world is destroyed. Like for example, the Saraswati river dries up, the world is destroyed. There is the great flood, the world is destroyed. The Kurukshetra world, the world is destroyed. And civilization is then re-established. And when the civilization is re-established, laws have to be re-established. The monarch or whoever it is who is the lawgiver, who gives those laws, is Manu. So every era has a Manu. So one of the great Manus was the Manu who re-established civilization after the destruction, after the great flood. The Manu who was there, who was rescued from this by the first avatar, Matsya avatar, Vishnu in the form of Matsya avatar, from the great flood. Very similar story to the story of Noah, by the way. So when he re-establishes civilization, he becomes Manu. But this Manu, where did he come from? He came from southern India, because he in fact is the earliest mention of as being the king of the Dramilas. And the river from which we found a small fish, it's a dry riverbed today, is in Tamil Nadu. So, point I'm making is, once you begin to look into Indian civilization, this idea first of all that civilization started in the north and then they came and gave civilization to the rest of India does not exist in our traditional thinking. If you read our traditional texts, there are kings across India, in different parts of India. The southernmost kings are mentioned in the Mahabharata. When Rajendra Chola becomes a great Samrat, how does he declare his greatness? He goes all the way, fights his way to the banks of the Ganga, gets water back, and re-establishes a new capital. And he mentions it, his greatest title is the Chola who went and got the Ganga here. Just last week, 1,000 years of the re-establishment of Rajendra Chola's new capital. So, what I'm trying to say is that we have had this great, strong sense of civilization. After all, Rajendra Chola had many accomplishments. He made a raid on Southeast Asia, a naval raid, which is very famous. He conquered much of Sri Lanka. He took over Maldives. He defeated the Cheras and took over Kerala. So he did many. But the thing that he considered to be his greatest achievement is to have gone to the Ganga and paid his respects there and come back and brought back some Ganga Jal. That is what he considered to be his greatest achievement. Even though he didn't incorporate that part of the country into his empire. He just made a raid, got water and came back. And he thought that was his greatest achievement of his life. Now you'll only think that if you had a conception of a sacred geography. Otherwise, why would you care about going to the Ganga, take some water from a local river and get done with it? So this is a very important way of thinking about the world that you have to take. And this repeatedly happens throughout our civilization. It is only if you understand this did you understand Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj. It's only if you understand this did you understand Guru Gobind Singh. Some homework for you. Find out from where his 5 Panch Pyaras came from across the country. They are not from Punjab. Only one is from that area. All the time this is going on because we are continuously restating our commitment to the civilization. And that original civilizational contract was entered thousands of years back in the Rig Veda and is explicitly stated in the last stanza of the Rig Veda. One last question and then there's a gentleman right then let me give it to the lady, young lady there, come on. Yeah, young lady there. Yeah. And then I'll come to the gentleman at the back as well. Yeah, 2 questions in the same way.
Namaste sir, my name is Sarthi Thamaskar and my question to you is that mainstream history still treats Indus Valley and Vedic culture as separate or even conflicting at times, but emerging evidence like you said are showcasing that our civilization has been evolving and dynamic rather than a disruption. Is it dishonest to keep teaching this as disconnected phases? And what are the implications of acknowledging a unified indigenous civilizational origin? How would this acknowledgement affect and or affect our foreign policy?
Okay. And you can ask the question and answer them together. There's a gentleman there as well.
Namaste sir, I am Aryan Andre. So, one of your slides said that India is evolving. So, by the time we involve various ideas in our nation, my question is sort of philosophical. So, what is it that keeps us together while we are evolving by the involving? And is it only being united together and evolving by the time, or it is something more than that?
Yeah, and they are connected questions. So, the point being made, first of all, is that how did we end up with this storyline? You see, one of the bizarre things is when the Aryan invasion theory was first come up with in the early 19th century by German Indologists. Their first theory, in fact, was that the Aryans had come to India and that they had slowly degraded because of the Brahmins, who were local priests who had somehow incorporated them. And so, interestingly, the very first iteration of it was that the civilization came from outside, yes, but the evil Brahmins, who were local druids, had somehow managed to tame the, fair, blue-eyed Aryans from the Central Asia. And the way they stated this is because, of course, in our text there are many conflicts between people who belong to Brahmin and Kshatriya castes. So, whether even Ramayana, if you want to interpret it as some sort of a Brahmin Kshatriya battle, then you can. But that is not what it's about, is it? But you see, that is how they interpreted it. Now, later on, the politics changed. So then they converted the Brahmins from being Dravidians to becoming the Aryans. So all of this, so you can see how this story has been jangled along depending on whatever the story you want to tell. But the fact is, none of our texts talk about this invasion. If you read the Rig Veda, which is the earliest text, surely if they were the Aryans who came from Central Asia, they would show some knowledge of Central Asia. But in fact, they show no knowledge of Central Asia. Their knowledge of geography is Western UP to western Punjab, maybe a little bit of the tributaries coming in from Afghanistan into Punjab. That is the extent of knowledge, and they show some knowledge of the Saraswati going into the sea, so maybe Gujarat. That is basically northwestern subcontinent is the extent of their knowledge. They don't know about the rest of the continent, the subcontinent to the south and east, but they also don't know anything about the Central Asia either. So there are limited knowledge area. Secondly, what were these Aryans? Why were they supposedly able to conquer India with ease? Well, they're supposed to have brought chariots with them and iron weapons. Now we know that the first examples of systematic use of iron anywhere in the world is actually in India. And not even in northwestern India, it's actually from southern India. So iron is actually a South Indian technology. Earliest known use of it is actually from what is now Telangana area, Godavari Basin. From there it spreads to eastern UP, Bihar, and then goes to west. So actually the northwest iron technology ends up last. There continue to be a Bronze Age civilization for a lot longer. And you see that in the change in power dynamics in the country, where Magad becomes the power dynamic power because they have iron weapons. So first of all, not only is iron an Indian technology, the first evidence of it is actually in southern and eastern India, or in central India, not in northwestern India. So the Aryans, first of all, seem to have been a technological disadvantage of anything. Second, they were all supposed to come on these chariots. Now, where is the oldest chariot in the world being found? There are lots of talk of chariots, but the first true chariot which was clearly used for warfare was found actually in India, in Sanoli, which is not even in northwest India, it's actually in UP. It's actually West UP, Bagpat. And therefore, you're talking about a UPite with the technology, so it's not even like in the Sindhu Valley, etc. And it shouldn't be surprising. Just look at a map. Even if somebody in Kazakhstan had a chariot and was trying to come to India, look at what a chariot looks like. Attempting to take a chariot through the Hindu Kush and then taking it through the loamy soil of Punjab with all those rivers, I'm assuring you they would have abandoned it by the time they ended up in Haryana. In fact, the only place in India where a chariot is a useful war engine is actually Haryana and Western UP, because it is flat enough, it's completely flat. Because you see, try and go and even take a horse cart and see, take it into anything that is slightly bouncy and you will be thrown around. Or you want to shoot arrows from it. Right? So if you are bringing a hot chariot over the Himalayas or over the Hindu Kush, or trying to carry it over the Sindhu, you've got to be kidding me. It would be a disadvantage, not an advantage. So just common sense suggests that neither iron nor chariots are at all of any use in warfare in India, except the chariot was useful in and around Haryana, Western UP, which is of course why the Kurukshetra war was fought there. You don't have a similar kind of Kurukshetra type war anywhere in Maharashtra, do you? Try and go to your hills, drive a chariot around Pune and see what will happen. So the point I'm making is, just from common sense, it makes no sense that these Aryans came in these chariots with iron weapons or horses. We now are getting more and more evidence that the horses were being imported into India from an early stage, and there were Indian horses also. But they were not being imported necessarily from Central Asia. They were being imported by sea from Arabia. Okay. So all the evidence, and now of course genetic evidence also, suggests that, where are these Aryans? The earliest example of the R star, the origins of the R, supposedly Aryan gene, is in India. The ancestors of the R star are K2B2, which is actually in Southeast Asia. So in fact, if there was any migration, it's basically Southeast Asians moving westward, not Central Asians moving eastward. So the reason I'm telling you all of this is that these are the kinds of tropes that were given to us because of political reasons. It does not no archaeological, genetic, textual evidence to prove this. And yet we continue to have them in our texts. They are slowly, the Overton window has shifted over the last couple of decades, so we are able to tell these stories in a different way. But even people who were there in the late 19th century, including Lokmanya Tilak, by the way, incorporated some of these ideas of that time. So even Lokmanya Tilak, even he accepted that Indians came from somewhere in the north, because that was the evidence that existed then. But the evidence has changed, and we should now think of this in a completely different way. Now, as far as the philosophical anchorings and moorings is concerned, as I showed you, that these roots are very deep, and I showed you through multiple ways, the Shakti Pithas, etc. But I can show you in many other ways. For example, Indian scripts. All indigenous scripts are derived from Brahmi. They have the same logic. They may look different, but they have the same logic. No matter how different the Odia script looks from the Bengali script, which looks from the Devanagari Marathi script, they actually are equivalents. And once I show it to you, you will see that the same da is there. Gakha, gaga is there. All of those are all there in all the pronunciation may be different, the way you write it may be different, but once I show you how they evolve in different directions, you will see that they are from the same root. So, the fact that we have been consciously a part of the same civilization for a very, very long time is something that we need to teach and to incorporate it into the way we think of ourselves. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
I would like to extend our deepest gratitude Now I invite on the stage the Adhyaksha of Shikra Mandali, Fadke sir, to please grace the dais.
मंच पर विराजमान आज के प्रमुख अतिथि माननीय स्तन्याल जी, नियामक मंडल के अध्यक्ष सोहनलाल जी जैन, केशव जी उगजई, लोकमान्य बाल गंगाधर तिलक के प्रपौत्र, आज के आपके नए प्राचार्य और आप सब लोगों की जो मार्गदर्शिका है, आपटे मैडम और उपस्थित युवा साथियों, आज का दिन तिलक पुण्यतिथि का दिन है। हम देश के लिए, राष्ट्र के लिए क्या करना चाहते हैं और क्या करेंगे, ये सोचने का दिन है। आज के प्रमुख अतिथि ने आपको बताया कि हमारी प्राचीन संस्कृति कितनी प्राचीन है, लेकिन एक बात याद रखना कि इतिहास की पुस्तक का पहला पन्ना कभी मिलता नहीं और पीछे जाना चाहते हैं। लेकिन इस सब का मतलब क्या होता है? हम सिर्फ ये कह सकते हैं कि हमारी संस्कृति प्राचीन है, लेकिन वो प्राचीन संस्कृति क्या बताती थी वो आज हम अपना रहे हैं या नहीं। कृण्वन्तु विश्वम आर्यम, ये हमारे ऋग्वेद कहते हैं, लेकिन उनकी अगली जो पहली पंक्ति है, ओम इंद्रम वर्धन्तु आत्म्र कृण्वन्तु विश्वम आर्यम अपक्नन्तौ एरामणः। वो प्रार्थना ऐसी है, हम पूरे विश्व को आर्यमय बनाना चाहते हैं। तो उसका मकसद ये नहीं कि जो द्रविड़ है, जो काले रंग का है, उसको हम घसाएंगे, उनको हम गोरापन लाएंगे, ऐसा नहीं है। उनकी नाक जो बैठी हुई है उसको नीचे खींच के हम सीधा करेंगे, ऐसा नहीं है। आर्य ये शब्द संस्कार का शब्द है। इस ऋग्वेद की ऋचा में उन्होंने प्रार्थना की है इंद्र से कि हम में जो आलस्य है, जो लेजीनेस है, वो दूर करो। आज हम सब लोगों को वो आलस दूर करना पड़ेगा। आने वाले काल में भारत को राष्ट्र बनाना है, देश नहीं। धर्म का अधिष्ठान होने के बाद ही राष्ट्र बनता है। जो राष्ट्र धर्म का अधिष्ठान भूलता है वो इतिहास में जाता है। हिंदू शब्द की व्याख्या इन्होंने आपको बताई। सावरकर जी ने जो व्याख्या बताई थी, आ सेतु सिंधु पर्यंता यस्य भारत भूमिका मातृभू पुण्यश्चैव सवै हिंदू रीति स्मृतः। जो सेतु, सेतु माने राम सेतु, आज भी आप जाओ दक्षिण भारत में, उस सेतु से सिंधु तक ये जो राष्ट्र है, इसको जो अपनी मातृभूमि कहता है, वो बंधु हिंदू है। वो कौन सी जात का है, वो कौन सी पंथ का है। इसलिए हमारी संस्कृति ने अब्दुल कलाम जी को हिंदू माना है। कैप्टन अब्दुल हमीद हिंदू है। उनके धर्म पर आधारित हिंदू धर्म की व्याख्या नहीं है, उनके आचार पर है, उनके विचार पर है। मैं युवा शक्तियों को कुछ बताना चाहता हूं। लोकमान्य बाल गंगाधर तिलक ने युवा लोगों में स्पुल्लिंग लाने के लिए एक वर्तमान पत्र शुरू किया था। उसका नाम था केसरी। केसरी माने सिंह, केसरी माने वनराज, जो बताता है कि मैं वन का राजा हूं। और उसके बारे में हितोपदेश नाम का हमारा एक ग्रंथ है, उसमें लिखा है, नाभिषेको न संस्कार सिंहस्य क्रियते वने विक्रमार्जित राजस्य स्वयमेव मृगेंद्रता। इस वनराज को ना किसी ने संस्कार किया है, ना किसी ने अभिषेक किया है, राज्याभिषेक। खुद के सामर्थ्य पर बलवान होकर वो राज्य संपादन करता है, इसलिए उसको मृगेंद्र बोला जाता है। हमें हिंदुस्तान को मृगेंद्र बनाना है, ये भूलना नहीं है। आने वाला वक्त हमारा है। इसलिए मुझे याद आ गया एक पंक्ति दैनिक केसरी में। लोकमान्य तिलक जी का देहांत होने के बाद नजीम केळकर उन्होंने संपादक की जिम्मेदारी स्वीकार कर ली। उन्होंने एक संपादकी के ऊपर एक श्लोक था, आजकल के केसरी में वो नहीं है। वो श्लोक है, तव स्मरण संतत स्फुरणदायिया माघड़ो, तव स्मरण संतत स्फुरणदायिया माघड़ो, त्वदीय गुण कीर्तन सुरम्य कानी पड़ो, स्वदेश हित चिंतना विण तुझी कथा नावडो, तुझ्या समुची आमुची तनु ही देश कार्य पड़ो। प्रार्थना यह है कि तिलक जी, उनको तिलक महाराज बोलते थे उस वक्त के लोग। इंग्रज और वहां का उस वक्त का सब समाज तेला तांबोळ्यांचे पुढारी, ऐसा उनका बयान था। यानी आम जनता से आए हुए वो नेतृत्व थे। आज हम उनका पुण्य करेंगे। आज हम अपने जीवन का कुछ ना कुछ ध्येय, उद्देश्य अपने मन में पक्का करेंगे, और वो होगा भारत समर्थ राष्ट्र बनेगा। आपका आने वाले काल में यही उद्दिष्ट होना चाहिए और एक बात ध्यान में रखना, मंजिलें उन्हीं को मिलती है जिनके सपनों में जान होती है। उड़ान पंखों से नहीं, हौसलों से की जाती है। मैं आपसे यही उम्मीद करता हूं, और मेरी, जिसको आप बोलते हैं कि वाणी को, क्योंकि इनको जाना है, आप सबका मैं आभार प्रदर्शन करता हूं। जय हिंद, जय महाराष्ट्र, धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद सर. आता कार्यक्रमाचे आभार प्रदर्शन करण्यासाठी मी वादसभा सचिव रमेश कचरे आणि अस्मी खांडेकर यांना आमंत्रित करतो.
First of all, I would like to extend our deepest gratitude to Honorable Sanjeev Sanyal sir for taking out his valuable time and delivering such a masterful and insightful keynote address today. I believe we, as audience, have been blown away with his deep knowledge and insights on the topic. I am certain that today's keynote address will continue to inspire many sparkling conversations and dialogues in upcoming days, and will certainly aspire many of us to think deeply about our civilizational identity as Bharatiyas. Once again, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to the Honorable Sir for gracing today's program.
नमस्कार, मी आजच्या कार्यक्रमाची औपचारिक सांगता करण्यासाठी उभा आहे. व्यासपीठावरील सर्व मान्यवरांचे मी मनपूर्वक आभार मानतो. आपल्या कार्यक्रमाचे प्रमुख वक्ते माननीय श्री संजीव सान्याल सर यांनी आपल्या व्यस्त दिनचर्येतून वेळ काढून आपल्या सगळ्यांना मार्गदर्शन केले, याबद्दल आम्ही आपले कृतज्ञ आहोत. व्यासपीठावर उपस्थित असलेले शिक्षण प्रसारक मंडळीचे अध्यक्ष ॲडव्होकेट सदानंद फडके सर यांचे देखील मी मनापासून आभार मानतो. त्याचप्रमाणे संस्थेच्या मॅनेजिंग काउन्सिलचे अध्यक्ष व उपाध्यक्ष यांचे देखील मी मनापासून आभार मानतो. महाविद्यालय विकास समितीचे अध्यक्ष यांचे देखील आभार मानतो. महाविद्यालयाचे प्राचार्य यांचे देखील धन्यवाद. तसेच महाविद्यालयाचे माजी प्राचार्य प्राध्यापक डॉक्टर सुनील गायकवाड सर यांचे देखील आभार मानतो. सर्व शिक्षक आणि कार्यक्रमातील सर्व सहकारी यांच्या सहकार्यामुळे आम्ही हा कार्यक्रम संपन्न करू शकलो. त्यांचे आम्ही ऋणी आहोत. ज्यांनी हा हॉल उपलब्ध करून दिला त्या शिप्र मंडळीचे धन्यवाद. तुम्ही सर्व एवढ्या मोठ्या संख्येने इथे उपस्थित राहिलात आणि कार्यक्रमाची शोभा वाढवली, याबद्दल खूप खूप आभारी आहे. पुन्हा एकदा सगळ्यांचे आभार मानतो आणि हा कार्यक्रम इथे संपन्न झाला असं जाहीर करतो. धन्यवाद.